Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving into a study that is, frankly, mind-bending. We're talking about using some of the most powerful brain imaging tech on the entire planet to look at a super rare state of consciousness, or maybe a state of non-consciousness that people can actually turn on and off themselves.
I mean, that's the big question, right? It's something people have wondered about for ages. But what if it's not just a philosophical puzzle? This research gets into a meditative state that might literally be the brain's own reset button, a way to reboot itself and come back online with some pretty amazing psychological benefits.
So what are we actually talking about here? This isn't your everyday meditation. It's a really advanced state, and to get what this study is all about, we've got to get our heads around this phenomenon first.
It's called extended cessation, or EC for short. And let's be clear, this is not sleep, it's not a coma, it's not some kind of disorder. It is a totally self-directed, voluntary, and this is key, reversible suspension of your awareness. Just think about that. Practitioners can literally choose to enter this state and then choose to come out of it. And that unique control, it makes it the perfect natural experiment for digging into the machinery of consciousness itself.
And the effects of hitting this reset button are, well, pretty incredible. Practitioners talk about this afterglow, where the world just seems sharper, more vibrant. Their minds go quiet. You know that constant inner voice we all have? For them, it's gone. And it's this huge shift toward well-being that makes scientists so eager to understand what's going on in the brain during EC.
Okay, but this brings up a massive problem. How on earth do you scientifically measure a state of, well, non-experience? You can't exactly ask someone what they're thinking if they're not thinking. This is where the sheer brilliance of the study's design really shines.
The researchers focused their entire super high-powered study on just 3 people. Now you might be thinking, 3? That's it? But that was the whole point. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. They went for depth over breadth. These weren't just any meditators. They were experts with thousands of hours of practice. And to get the most detailed data imaginable, they used an ultra-powerful 7 Tesla fMRI scanner, a machine so sensitive it can see what's happening in the tiniest, deepest parts of the brain that are thought to be crucial for consciousness. Now, to figure out what makes EC so unique, you need a baseline, right? You need something to compare it to. So, inside that scanner, the meditators didn't just go into the EC state. They also did 2 other active mental tasks. One was replaying recent memories in their head, and the other was counting backward from 10,000. This clever setup allowed the scientists to see the brain activity of normal thinking and then digitally subtract it, isolating the pure, unique signature of non-thinking.
So how'd they actually measure what was going on? It wasn't just about seeing which parts of the brain lit up. No, these researchers took a seriously multi-layered look at how the entire brain system was shifting and changing.
They basically brought out the entire neuroimaging toolbox. First, they used a technique called regional homogeneity to measure the synchronized local chatter in specific brain areas. Then, they mapped the brain's entire telephone network to see which areas were talking to each other. And finally, they looked at something called principal gradients, which is like revealing the brain's core organizational chart, how it's structured from handling simple sensations all the way up to complex, abstract thoughts. And the results from this incredibly deep scan were fascinating. The brain didn't just power down. It didn't just go quiet. Instead, it went through this profound and very, very specific reorganization.
This line from the paper is basically the headline. You know, the common idea is that when you lose consciousness, your whole cortex, the outer layer of your brain, just kind of shuts down. But this study shows that's just not what happens in EC. It's a way more surgical, selective process. And this right here shows you the core of that selective process. The brain's activity basically split into 2 different stories. On one hand, you have the unimodal regions, the parts that handle raw sensory info, like sight. Their local activity actually became more synchronized. But then you have the transmodal regions, like the default mode network. You could think of that as the brain's me center, the source of our inner monologue, and that part went quiet. This could be the direct neurosignature of that absence of inner chatter, while the still active sensory parts could explain why the world feels so vivid afterward.
And here's the really wild part. This state wasn't a collapse into chaos. You'd think the brain might get, fuzzy, disorganized. Nope, the opposite happened. When they looked at the brain's organizational chart, it didn't flatten, it actually expanded. The space between the parts for sensing and the parts for thinking grew even wider. During this reset, the brain's different jobs became even more specialized, not less.
So what does all this mean for the really big scientific theories about what consciousness even is? Well, a study this unique provides the perfect opportunity to put those big ideas to the test.
Yeah, these findings let us check the homework of the major scientific theories of consciousness. For example, a really popular one, integrated information theory, would predict that the brain's organization should basically flatten or collapse in a state like this. But this study found the exact opposite. The results actually give a huge boost to a newer model called the active inference framework, which suggests that consciousness is controlled in a much more specific, gated way, which is precisely what the brain scans showed.
And that brings us right back to this incredible idea of a brain reset. It looks like EC works by shutting down those burdensome, self-obsessed thought loops that cause so much of our stress, while at the same time, it sharpens the very systems we use to perceive the world. It's like a neural reboot that clears out the mental patterns that contribute to suffering, letting us plug back into the world with new clarity and peace.
I mean, this research just opens up a whole new way of thinking about how flexible our minds can be. It shows that the brain can, on its own, take apart and then reassemble consciousness, not by just shutting everything down, but through this elegant, selective, and organized process. It leaves us with a really profound question to chew on. Have these meditators stumbled upon the brain's own built-in mechanism for resetting itself toward well-being?